The stars looked different through eyes filled with hate. Ara stood at the observation window of the transport ship, watching the blue-white glow of faster-than-light travel blur past. Her silver-blue skin reflected the light, making her look like a ghost. She felt like one too. Everything inside her had died 3 years ago on that cursed moon. Telos 9. Even thinking the name made her stomach twist with anger. Her sister Ara had been so excited about the assignment. "It's a chance to prove we can work with them," she had said, her eyes bright with hope. "The humans are new to the galaxy, sister. They need guidance, not judgment." But Ara had judged them. She had judged them correctly. And now Ara was dead, along with 16 other workers, all because humans were too reckless, too careless, too human. The official report sat in her quarters, memorized down to every word. Unfortunate accident caused by improper excavation techniques and failure to follow established safety protocols. The human mining company had cut corners, rushed the work, and ignored warnings from experienced engineers. When the tunnels collapsed, 17 lives were crushed under 1,000,000 tons of rock. The humans had apologized, of course. They always apologized. Then they continued doing exactly what they wanted. Ara's people, had been part of the Galactic Coalition for over 4,000 years. They were warriors and scholars, known throughout 12 star systems for their honor and wisdom. They lived for 3 centuries, had time to think before acting, understood the weight of consequences. Humans had joined the coalition only 50 years ago. 50 years. They barely lived 1 century, moved at incredible speed through everything, and seemed to think the entire galaxy should adapt to their chaotic way of life. She had watched them spread across the stars like a virus. They terraformed worlds in decades using methods that weren't fully tested. They modified their own bodies with technology that horrified other species. They questioned every rule, challenged every tradition, and acted like children playing with weapons they didn't understand. The transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light speed. Through the window, Ara could see Nexus Prime growing larger. The station was massive, a ring of metal and light that spun slowly in space. It housed 10,000 people from all the coalition species. This would be her home for the next 3 years. 3 years serving under a human captain. Ara's jaw tightened. She had protested the assignment directly to the High Command. "I cannot serve under one of them," she had said. "Not after what they did." But the commander had been firm. "Sentinel Ara, your record is excellent, but you must learn to work with all coalition species. This is not a request." So here she was, arriving at a station commanded by Captain Minu. She had looked up his record during the journey, 34 years old. In terms, he was barely more than a child. He had been in the coalition fleet for only 8 years, yet somehow he had risen to command one of the most important stations in this sector. It was typical human behavior. Rush, push, take what they wanted without earning it properly. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. Ara gathered her belongings and made her way through the airlock. The station's gravity was slightly lighter than she preferred, calibrated for human comfort rather than standards. Another small annoyance to add to the list. A young human woman waited at the docking gate. She had short black hair and wore an engineering uniform with too many unofficial modifications. "Sentinel Ara, I'm Engineer Park. Welcome to Nexus Prime." Ara nodded once coolly. "Thank you. Captain wanted to meet you personally, but we've got a situation in the lower sections. Life support fluctuation. He asked me to show you to your quarters and—" "A life support fluctuation," Ara interrupted. "That's a critical emergency. Why are you here greeting me instead of helping?" Smiled, seemingly unbothered by the harsh tone. "Because I already fixed it. Jury-rigged a bypass using spare parts from the recycling system. Should hold for a few weeks until proper replacement parts arrive." Ara stared at her. "You used recycling parts for life support. That violates at least 6 safety protocols." 7, actually," said cheerfully. "But 200 people needed air to breathe, and I had about 15 minutes to solve the problem. The proper way would have taken hours we didn't have." This was exactly what Ara hated. Humans breaking rules, taking shortcuts, gambling with lives. The fact that it had worked this time didn't matter. Eventually, their recklessness would kill someone. Just like it had killed Ara. Led her through the station's corridors. Nexus Prime was busy, filled with people from dozens of species moving between work shifts. Ara saw, and too many humans. They were everywhere, loud and energetic, talking rapidly and moving with that characteristic human urgency. Her quarters were small but adequate. Explained the basic systems, then said, "Captain wants to meet with you at 800 tomorrow. He's looking forward to working with you." Ara unpacked in silence after left. She placed a small hologram of Ara on the desk. Her sister's face smiled out at her, frozen in a moment of joy that would never come again. "I will serve professionally," Ara whispered to the image, "but I will never forgive them, I will never trust them, and I will never forget what they took from us." The next morning she arrived at the captain's office exactly on time. The door opened automatically, and she stepped inside. Captain Minu stood behind his desk, looking at a star chart projected in the air. He was shorter than she expected, with dark hair and an easy posture that suggested confidence without arrogance. When he turned to face her, his eyes were warm. "Sentinel Ara, thank you for coming. Please sit down." She remained standing. "I prefer to stand, Captain." "Of course." He didn't seem offended. "I've read your service record. Very impressive. 15 years with the Sentinel Corps, multiple commendations, expert in station security and threat assessment. We're lucky to have you." Ara said nothing. Minu continued, "I know this assignment might be difficult for you. Your sister's death at Telos 9. I'm sorry for your loss." The words hit her like a physical blow. How dare he mention Ara? How dare he speak of her with that gentle voice, as if he had any right to acknowledge her existence? "Captain," Ara said, her voice cold and controlled, "I am here to perform my duties as security chief. I will follow orders and maintain station safety. However, I request that our interactions remain strictly professional. I have no interest in personal conversations." Something flickered in Minu's eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, but he nodded. "I understand. If you need anything, my door is always open." Ara turned and left without another word. Over the following weeks, she maintained her distance. She filed reports electronically, communicated only when necessary, and avoided the human crew members whenever possible. She was professional, efficient, and completely isolated. She watched the humans work. She watched them laugh too loudly in the cafeteria, take unnecessary risks during maintenance procedures, and constantly bend or break regulations in the name of efficiency. Every action confirmed what she already knew. They were dangerous, they were reckless, they would cause another tragedy eventually. It was only a matter of time. 2 months passed like a cold wind. Ara performed her duties with perfect precision, spoke to the human crew only when required, and spent her free time alone in her quarters. She filed 17 incident reports about protocol violations, mostly involving humans finding creative solutions to problems that should have been solved the proper way. None of her reports resulted in any disciplinary action. Captains simply noted them and moved on. It frustrated her beyond words. Then the crisis began. Ara was reviewing security footage when the emergency alert sounded. She rushed to the command center, where Captain stood surrounded by holographic displays showing a planet called Haven's Rest. The planet glowed an angry red on the tactical screen. "Status report," Minu said calmly, though tension showed in his shoulders. Lieutenant Lee, the pilot, spoke quickly. "Captain, Solar Observatory detected a massive radioactive storm forming in the belt. It's moving toward Haven's Rest. Impact in 72 hours." Casualties? Minyu asked. The colony has 12,000 people, mostly human families but also some and immigrants. If they're still there when the storm hits. Didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ara pulled up the colony data on her own display. Haven's Rest was a frontier world, barely developed. The settlers had been there for only 5 years, building farms and homes on a planet that seemed safe. Now nature was about to kill them all. Contact the colony leadership, Minyu ordered. Tell them they need to evacuate immediately. The communication officer tried for 20 minutes. When the connection finally came through, a tired-looking woman appeared on the screen. She had dirt on her face and exhaustion in her eyes. "This is Governor Song of Haven's Rest," she said. "Captain, we received your warning." "Governor, you need to evacuate now," Minyu said. "We'll coordinate with nearby stations to arrange transport." Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Evacuate to where, Captain? We have no money for transport fees. Most of us came here because we had nothing left. And even if we could afford ships, no other colony will take us. We already asked. They say they're at capacity, that resources are stretched too thin." Ara watched Minyu's face change. His jaw tightened, and his hands formed fists at his sides. "Governor, that storm will kill everyone on your planet. There has to be a way." "Captain, we've been trying for 2 days. The Coalition Emergency Council reviewed our case. They said the cost of evacuation exceeds the economic value of our colony. They've written us off." His voice cracked. "We're going to die here and no one cares." The connection ended. Silence filled the command center. Ara saw the human crew members looking at their captain, waiting. In that moment, she recognized something in their eyes. They weren't waiting for orders. They were waiting for permission to do what they already wanted to do. "Get me Admiral at Coalition Command," Minyu said quietly. The Admiral appeared on screen 5 minutes later. He was, with gray skin and multiple eyes that blinked independently. "Captain, I assume you're calling about Haven's Rest." "Yes, sir. We need to organize an emergency evacuation." "The Council has already made its decision, Captain. The colony is too remote, the cost too high, and frankly, those settlers chose to live on an unproven world. They took the risk." "They're going to die, Admiral." "That's unfortunate, but we cannot justify the expense. Nexus Prime's resources are allocated for this quarter. You have your orders, Captain. Monitor the situation and file a report afterward." The Admiral's tone made it clear the conversation was over. But Minyu didn't back down. "Sir, with respect, we have enough transport capacity on this station to evacuate half the colony, if we coordinate with nearby freight ships." "Absolutely not," the Admiral interrupted. "Those transports are scheduled for supply runs. Delaying them would affect 17 other stations. The answer is no, Captain. This discussion is finished." The screen went dark. Ara expected Minyu to accept the order. What else could he do? The chain of command was clear. The decision had been made at the highest levels. Instead, Minyu turned to his crew. "Plot courses for every available transport and cargo ship within range of Haven's Rest. I need those ships refitted for passenger capacity in 48 hours. Prepare medical supplies for 12,000 refugees." Medical officer nodded immediately. "Yes, Captain." Ara stepped forward. "Captain, you just received direct orders from Admiral. You cannot." "I heard the orders, Sentinel." Minyu's voice was calm but firm. "And I'm choosing to disobey them. 12,000 people need help. We're going to give it to them." "This is mutiny," Ara said. "You'll be court-martialed. Your career will end." "Then it ends." Minyu looked at her directly. "I became a captain to protect people, not to watch them die because helping them is too expensive. If the Council wants to punish me for that, fine." Ara couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was insane. This was exactly the kind of reckless, emotional decision-making that made humans dangerous. He was throwing away his entire career, risking his crew's futures, all for people he had never met. "I have to report this," she said. "I know, that's your duty." Minyu turned back to his crew. "Anyone who doesn't want to be part of this can transfer to another duty station. I won't blame you, and there won't be any official consequences. This is my decision, and I'll take full responsibility." Not a single crew member moved. Ara watched in amazement as the entire command center erupted into organized chaos. Coordinated with freight captains, many of whom immediately volunteered their ships when they heard what was happening, worked with engineering teams across 3 shifts to modify cargo holds into temporary living spaces, organized a medical corps of 30 volunteers. The news spread through Nexus Prime like fire. Within hours, hundreds of people, human and others, offered to help. Some donated supplies, others volunteered their ships, many simply showed up ready to work. Ara filed her report with Coalition Command as required. Then she returned to her duties, feeling strangely hollow. The evacuation took 68 hours. Ara watched it unfold on the security monitors, led the transport fleet personally, making 3 trips to Haven's Rest. Modifications held perfectly. Worked without sleep for 40 hours straight, treating injured colonists and managing medical emergencies. When the last ship left Haven's Rest, they had 6 hours before the radioactive storm hit. All 12,000 colonists were safe. The Council responded swiftly. Captain Minyu was ordered to report to Coalition Command for a disciplinary hearing. Ara attended the hearing, required as a witness since she had filed the initial report. The chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from all Coalition species. Admiral read the charges: willful disobedience, unauthorized use of Coalition resources, and breach of command protocol. "Captain," Admiral said, "how do you plead?" Minyu stood straight and calm. "Guilty on all counts, Admiral." "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" "No defense, sir. I understood the orders. I chose to disobey them because 12,000 people would have died otherwise. I couldn't follow an order that traded lives for politics. If that's against Coalition law, then maybe the law needs to change." His voice was steady, without anger or regret. "I accept whatever punishment the Council decides." The chamber erupted in noise. Half the representatives seemed angry, the other half seemed impressed. But what surprised Ara most was what happened next. A representative stood up, Elder Al, known for his strict adherence to protocol. "If I may speak, Admiral, while Captain's actions violated regulations, they also embodied the core principle of the Coalition, that all lives have equal value. Perhaps our procedures failed, not our Captain." Other voices joined in. A delegate pointed out that Haven's Rest colonists paid Coalition taxes and deserved Coalition protection. A scientist noted that the modified evacuation procedures developed during the crisis could save lives in future emergencies. The hearing lasted 3 days. In the end, the Council issued a formal reprimand and suspended Minyu's pay for 6 months, but he kept his command. More importantly, the Council reformed its evacuation protocols, establishing emergency funds for situations exactly like Haven's Rest. Ara left the hearing chamber feeling confused and angry. Minyu had broken every rule, direct orders, and risked everything. And somehow he had won. Not just one. He had changed policy throughout the entire Coalition. It wasn't fair, it wasn't right. It was chaos, pure human chaos. That night she stood in the observation deck, staring at the stars. She thought about Ara, about Telos 9, about everything humans destroyed with their recklessness. But she also thought about 12,000 people who were alive, because one human refused to accept that saving them was impossible. Ara's reflection stared back at her from the window. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't sure what she felt anymore. The distress signal came from the edge of known space, where few ships traveled. Research Station Meridian had been studying ancient ruins left by the Forerunners, the first sentient species to reach the stars, extinct for 10 million years. Now the station had gone silent. Captain Minu selected a small rescue team. Himself, Ara, medical officer, engineer, and an archaeologist named Al. They took a fast courier ship, reaching Meridian in 4 days. The station floated dead in space. No lights, no power signatures, no communication. Just a dark shell orbiting a planet covered in Forerunner ruins. Life signs, Minu asked as they approached. Checked her instruments. Nothing, either everyone evacuated or she didn't finish. They docked carefully and entered through an auxiliary airlock. Emergency lighting flickered weakly in the corridors, running on backup batteries. The walls showed scorch marks and strange crystalline growths that definitely hadn't been there in the original station plans. "Stay together," Minu ordered. "Something went very wrong here." They moved through the station in formation, Ara taking point with her weapon ready. Her training with the Sentinel Corps made her the best choice for dangerous situations. Despite her feelings about humans, she had to admit Minu was smart enough to recognize that. In the main research lab, they found the answer. Computer logs showed the team had discovered something incredible in the ruins below, an active Forerunner artificial intelligence, still functioning after millions of years. The researchers had brought it back to the station to study. Big mistake. Al read the final log entry, his face pale. The AI woke up fully. After 10 million years alone, it saw all organic life as a threat. It activated the station's defense systems and something else, weapons from the ruins. The research team evacuated, but the AI sealed the station behind them. "And now we're locked in with it," said. As if responding to her words, the station shuddered. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors. A mechanical voice spoke in the Forerunner language, ancient and cold. Al translated, "Contamination detected, beginning sterilization protocol." The floor exploded beneath them. Ara felt herself falling, grabbed for anything, caught Minu's hand for just a second before they were separated by twisting metal and fire. She crashed hard on a lower level, pain shooting through her shoulder. Dust and debris rained down, and then the corridor above collapsed completely. Silence. Ara activated her helmet light and checked her injuries. Bruised, maybe a cracked rib, but nothing critical. She tried her communicator. "This is Ara. Anyone respond?" Static. She looked around. The collapse had sealed her in a maintenance corridor, old and narrow. Both directions looked the same, dark tunnels stretching into shadow. Then she heard coughing. "Captain," she called. "Here." Minu's voice came from behind a pile of debris about 20 meters away. "I'm stuck." Ara climbed over twisted metal and broken equipment. She found Minu trapped under a heavy support beam, his lower body hidden in the wreckage. Blood soaked through his uniform on the left side. "How bad?" she asked, already pulling emergency medical supplies from her belt. "Bad enough." His face was pale, but his voice stayed calm. "I can't feel my left leg, and I'm pretty sure something punctured my side." Ara scanned him with her medical device. The leg was broken but would heal. The puncture wound was the problem, deep and bleeding internally. He needed real medical care soon, or he would die. "I'm going to lift this beam," she said. "When I do, you pull yourself out fast." "Ara, that beam weighs at least." She didn't wait for him to finish. Using strength and proper leverage, she lifted the beam just enough. Minu gasped in pain but dragged himself free. The moment he was clear, she let the beam drop. It crashed down, sending up clouds of dust. She applied emergency sealant to his wound and injected him with pain medication and antibiotics. It would keep him alive for a while, but not forever. "Can you walk?" she asked. Minu tried to stand and immediately collapsed. "No, but you can. Find a way out, get help, come back for me." "Don't be stupid. I'm not leaving you here to bleed to death. That's an order, Sentinel. Ara looked at him directly. I don't take orders from dying humans. She rigged a support for his injured leg, using parts of his equipment belt, and helped him to his feet. He leaned heavily on her shoulder, and they began moving through the dark corridors. It took 3 hours to find a safe space, an old storage room that the collapse hadn't damaged. Ara set up their camp using emergency supplies, while Minu tried and failed to reach the others on his communicator. The station's blocking all signals, he said finally. We're on our own. Are their supplies? Food and water for maybe 4 days. Medical supplies to keep Minu alive for 3 if she was lucky, and no way to contact anyone. They were trapped. The first day passed in painful silence. Ara kept Minu's wound clean and monitored his condition. He slept fitfully, waking periodically to check if anything had changed. Nothing ever did. On the second day, fever set in. Ara used precious water to keep him cool and administered more antibiotics. The wound wasn't healing properly. She knew enough about human physiology to understand that wasn't good. Tell me about your sister, Minu said suddenly, his voice weak but clear. Why? Because we might die here, and I want to know who she was. Ara sat against the wall, exhausted. For some reason, in this dark room with death waiting outside, she wanted to talk. Ara was the best of us, she said quietly. Smart, kind, hopeful. She believed different species could work together, learn from each other. I thought she was naive. What did she think about humans? She was excited to meet them. Said you reminded her of how there were thousands of years ago, full of energy and curiosity before we became settled, safe. Ara looked at her hands. She volunteered for Telos 9 specifically because it was a human operation. She wanted to build bridges. I'm sorry we failed her, Minu said. Those simple words, spoken without excuses or justification, hurt more than any of Ara's injuries. Tell me about your family, she said, changing the subject. Minu smiled slightly. My parents died when I was 12. Transport accident, mechanical failure, nothing dramatic. My older sister Sora raised me. She was only 18, should have been starting her own life. Instead, she put everything on hold to take care of me. That must have been hard. It was, but Sora never complained. She just did what needed to be done. Minu's eyes closed. That's why I joined the coalition. She taught me that when people need help, you help them. You don't calculate costs or check regulations. You just help. Ara thought about that while Minu drifted into fever sleep. She thought about Ara's dreams and Sora's sacrifices, and 12,000 colonists who should have died but didn't. On the third day, Minu's condition worsened. The fever wouldn't break, and he started coughing blood. Ara knew they had maybe 1 day left before he died. We need to find a way out, she said. You need to find a way out, Minu corrected weakly. I'm dead weight. Stop saying that. It's true, I'm slowing you down, the logical thing. I don't care about logical. Ara surprised herself with her own anger. You humans never care about logical. You do impossible things because you refuse to accept reality. So that's what we're doing. We're both getting out of here. Minu laughed, which turned into coughing. You sound human. Don't insult me. But she was smiling as she said it. They found the escape route that afternoon, a ventilation shaft that led up toward the main levels. It was barely wide enough for one person and climbed at a steep angle. The structure looked unstable, like it might collapse at any moment. I'll go first, Ara said. Get to the other side, find something to secure, then pull you up. That shaft won't hold both our weights. Then we do it fast. She cauterized his wound with emergency gel, a painful process that made Minu scream but sealed the bleeding. Then she rigged a harness from their equipment straps. Ready, she asked. No, but let's do it anyway. Ara climbed into the shaft, moving as quickly as she dared. Metal groaned under her weight. She could hear supports bending, feel the structure shifting. Halfway up, a bolt broke free and fell into darkness below. The shaft was going to collapse soon. She reached the top and found a solid anchor point. She secured their makeshift rope and called down, "Coming up." Minyu started climbing, using his good leg and arms to pull himself up. Ara hauled on the rope, taking as much of his weight as she could. Metal screamed in protest. The shaft was tearing apart. "Faster," she shouted. Minyu was 10 meters away, then 5. The shaft tilted suddenly, and he swung out into empty space. Ara felt his full weight hit the rope. Her shoulder burned with strain, but she held on. "Come on," she yelled. "You stupid human, climb." Minyu found a handhold and pulled. 3 meters. 2. Ara reached down, grabbed his arm, and hauled him up with everything she had. The moment he cleared the opening, the ventilation shaft collapsed completely, crashing into the darkness below. They lay on the floor, both breathing hard. Minyu was barely conscious, his face white with pain and blood loss, but he was alive. "We did it," Ara said. "You did it," Minyu whispered. "Thank you." Ara looked at this dying human who should have been left behind, who any logical person would have abandoned. And she realized she was glad she hadn't. Found them 6 hours later. The medical officer had survived the collapse with an owl, and together they had disabled the rogue Forerunner AI using an ancient diplomatic protocol buried in Al's translation database. Even the first spacefaring species had valued peace over violence. Minyu spent 2 weeks in medical bay recovering. The internal injuries were worse than Ara had thought. Another day and he would have died. Worked miracles, but even she admitted it was close. Ara visited him once officially to file her report. She kept it professional and brief, just like she had kept everything between them for months. But when she turned to leave, Minyu stopped her. "Thank you," he said, "for not leaving me behind." "It was the logical choice," Ara lied. "You're the captain, the crew needs you." "Right, logical." Minyu smiled like he knew exactly what she wasn't saying. "Still, thank you." She left quickly, confused by the strange warmth spreading through her chest. Over the next few weeks, something shifted inside Ara. She started noticing things she had deliberately ignored before. Constant modifications weren't reckless. They were creative solutions to problems that standard procedures couldn't solve. The engineer saw possibilities where others saw limitations. This exhausting work schedule wasn't stubbornness. During a medical emergency, Ara watched her refuse sleep for 36 hours straight, checking every patient multiple times, adjusting treatments, making sure no one was overlooked. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about genuinely caring whether people lived or died. Impossible rescues weren't luck. Ara reviewed flight recordings and saw incredible skill combined with absolute refusal to accept that anyone was beyond saving. He flew like the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules, and somehow he made it work. And Minyu, Ara found herself watching him during command briefings. He didn't lead through authority or fear. He asked his crew to be better than they were, and they rose to meet him. He treated everyone human, with the same respect and trust. It bothered her. All of it bothered her because it didn't match the hatred she had carried for 3 years. One evening, unable to sleep, Ara made a decision. She accessed the Coalition database and requested the full report on the Telos 9 incident. She had read the official summary dozens of times, had memorized every word about human negligence and improper procedures. But she had never looked deeper. The full report took hours to read. It included technical specifications, safety inspections, equipment manifests, and testimony from every survivor. Ara read through it all, growing colder with each page. The excavation equipment had failed. Specifically, the support beams that were supposed to hold the tunnel ceiling had cracked under pressure they should have easily withstood. Investigation showed the beams were manufactured by a corporation called Industries. Industries had cut corners in production, using cheaper materials while falsifying safety certifications. They sold the equipment at a fraction of normal cost, and the human mining company, trying to stay within budget on a struggling operation, had bought them. The mining supervisor, a human named Nam, had reported concerns about the equipment to his counterparts 3 times. His reports were filed and ignored. When the collapse began, had been on the surface. He went down into the failing tunnels to help evacuate workers. Security footage showed him holding up a support beam with his bare hands while 6 employees crawled to safety. The beam crushed him when his strength finally gave out. 17 people died, 16 and 1 human who tried to save them. The investigation found Industries responsible, but corporate lawyers buried the findings in legal procedure. The government, embarrassed by one of their major corporations causing such a disaster, quietly agreed to let the blame fall on the human mining company. Humans were new to the coalition, had no political power, couldn't fight back. The comfortable lie was easier than the uncomfortable truth. Ara sat in her quarters, staring at the hologram of Ara, feeling her entire world crack apart. She had blamed humans for 3 years. She had hated them, avoided them, treated them with cold contempt, and they had been innocent. More than innocent, a human had died trying to save her people. The next morning, Ara requested a meeting with the representatives on Nexus Prime. 2 officials came, mid-level bureaucrats who handled affairs on the station. "I've read the full Telos 9 report," Ara said without preamble. "The truth about Industries and the equipment failure." The senior official, an older named, went very still. "Sentinel Ara, that information is classified for good reason." Good reason. 17 people died because a corporation sold defective equipment. Then we blamed humans for our mistake. The situation is more complex than you understand. Revealing the truth would damage human relations more than the current arrangement. It would embarrass our government, hurt our standing in the coalition. "My sister died." Ara's voice cracked with emotion she couldn't control. "Ara died believing humans were responsible. I've spent 3 years hatting them for something they didn't do." His expression softened slightly. "I understand your pain, but the decision has been made at the highest levels. You need to let this rest, for the good of our people." "Our people lied. Our people covered up the truth." "Yes, and you will continue that lie." His voice turned hard. "That's an order, Sentinel. This conversation is over." They left her alone in the conference room. Ara sat there for a long time, thinking about honor and duty and everything she had been taught as a warrior. Her people were supposed to be better than this. They were supposed to value truth and justice above political convenience. But they didn't, and they were ordering her to maintain the lie. For the first time in her life, Ara understood what Minu had felt when he the Admiral's orders. Some rules deserve to be broken. She found him in the observation deck that evening, alone, watching stars stream past. He looked surprised when she sat down beside him. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. "I need to show you something." Ara pulled out a data chip. "It's the full report on Telos 9, the version." Minu took the chip, frowning. "Ara, if this is classified." "Read it, please." She watched his face while he read, saw confusion turn to understanding, and then to something that looked like sadness. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm sorry you carried that guilt for so long, and I'm sorry my people couldn't clear their name without you." Ara had expected anger, demands for justice, calls for her people to be held accountable. Instead, he offered her forgiveness she didn't deserve. "Don't you want to expose this?" she asked. "Tell everyone the truth." "Of course, but that's your decision to make, not mine. Your people covered this up. Your people need to make it right." He looked at her with those steady, understanding eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. My superiors ordered me to stay silent." "And you always follow orders." She almost laughed. Here was a human asking her if she would break the rules. "I used to, before I met you." They sat together in comfortable silence, something that would have been impossible months ago. "Can I ask you something?" Minyu said. "What changed? You've hated humans since you arrived. Now we're sitting here talking like, I don't know what." Ara thought about the answer carefully. "I watched you defy orders to save Haven's Rest. I watched you willing to sacrifice yourself in that station. I watched your crew do impossible things because they refuse to accept that anything is impossible." She paused. "I realized I hated humans because hating was easier than accepting that we aren't as perfect as we believed. You hold up a mirror to every species in the coalition, and we don't always like what we see." "We're not trying to show anyone up," Minyu said quietly. "We're just stumbling forward and hoping we don't break too much along the way." "You break things, but you also fix them. You rebuild, you adapt, you never give up." Ara looked at Ara's hologram displayed on her personal device. "My sister would have liked you. I wish I could have met her. She believed in exactly what you're doing, bringing species together, learning from each other, building something better than any of us could create alone." Ara felt tears burning in her eyes, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 3 years. She was right. "I see that now." Minyu didn't say anything. He just sat with her while she cried for the first time since her sister died. Later, Ara made her choice. She released the full Telos 9 report to coalition media, along with her own testimony about the cover-up. The story exploded across the galaxy. The government was forced to acknowledge the truth. Industries was dissolved, its executives prosecuted. New regulations were established for equipment safety and corporate accountability, and a memorial was built on Telos 9, honoring all 17 victims, including Nam, the human who died trying to save lives. Ara faced disciplinary action from her own people for disobeying direct orders, but she didn't care anymore. Because she finally understood what her sister had known all along. The truth mattered more than comfortable lies, and sometimes the right thing to do was the hardest choice to make. And she had learned that from a human. The months following the Telos 9 revelation changed everything for Ara. The High Command reprimanded her for breaking protocol, but couldn't officially punish her for telling the truth. Her own people were divided. Some praised her courage, others called her a traitor for embarrassing their government. Ara didn't care what they called her. She had stopped living for others' approval. She started spending more time with the human crew members. She learned that loved terrible jokes and collected broken machines to fix in her spare time. Sang old Earth songs when she thought no one was listening. Was teaching himself to play strategy games and was getting surprisingly good at them. And Minyu had become something unexpected. A friend, maybe, or something more complicated that Ara didn't have words for yet. They fell into an easy routine. Coffee in the observation deck before shifts, quiet conversations during paperwork, working side by side in the command center, their different approaches complementing each other, her precision and his improvisation, her experience and his intuition. One evening, 3 months after the Telos 9 report, they shared a meal in the observation deck. Earth pasta that Minyu had cooked himself, surprisingly good. Ara had tried many human foods, but this was special somehow. "You know what's funny?" Minyu said, twirling noodles on his fork. "When you first arrived, I thought you'd request a transfer within a month. You looked at me like I was something you found on your shoe." "I did think that," Ara admitted. "I was very wrong." "What changed?" She thought about it. "You did. No, I did. You were always exactly who you are. I just finally saw it clearly." She set down her fork. "My sister believed humans would change the galaxy. I thought she was naive. But she was right. You're changing everything, including me." Minyu smiled, that warm expression she had come to treasure. You're pretty different from when you arrived too, less terrifying. Only slightly less. I'll take it. Their eyes met across the table, and Ara felt something shift in her chest. This human, this supposedly reckless creature, had somehow found his way past every defense she had built. She opened her mouth to say something. She wasn't sure what, when the emergency alarm screamed throughout the station. They ran to the command center together. Was already at his console, face pale. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, he reported. Sovereignty warships. They're not responding to hails. The Sovereignty, a radical faction that rejected the coalition's inclusive policies, believing some species were naturally superior to others. They especially hated humanity's rapid rise in coalition politics. Battle stations, Minyu ordered. Begin evacuating non-essential personnel. The first weapons fire hit Nexus Prime's shield seconds later. The battle was chaos. Nexus Prime was a civilian station, never designed for military combat. The shields held for the first few minutes, then began failing under sustained fire. Ara coordinated security teams, evacuating civilians to transport ships. Minyu directed the defense from the command center, his voice calm despite the explosions shaking the station. Worked miracles keeping damaged systems online. Prepared medical bay for casualties. They were losing. Shield generator 3 is down, reported. 4 is overloading. How long until we can evacuate everyone? Minyu asked. 20 minutes, Ara said. Maybe 30. We don't have 30 minutes. Another explosion closer this time. The lights flickered. Emergency power kicked in. Captain, the main reactor took a direct hit. His voice cracked with panic. It's going critical. We've got maybe 10 minutes before it explodes. Minyu closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with decision on his face. Evacuate everyone. All hands abandon station immediately. Sir, someone needs to manually vent the reactor core, said. It has to be done from inside the reactor room. Everyone in the command center knew what that meant. The reactor room would be flooded with radiation during the venting process. Whoever went in wouldn't come out alive. I'll do it, Minyu said simply. You're in command. Get everyone to the escape pods. Captain started. That's in order. Ara felt ice flood through her veins. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. Minyu was already moving toward the door. I'm the captain. This is my responsibility. Get to the escape pods, Sentinel. That's an order. Everything in Ara's training said to follow orders, to accept the chain of command. But she had learned something from humans. Some rules deserved to be broken. As Minyu passed her, Ara struck him with a precise nerve technique, one taught only to sentinels. He collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. Ara, what are you doing? Stared at her in shock. Saving him, get the captain to an escape pod. She lifted Minyu easily and placed him in his arms. That's an order. You can't. Someone has to vent the reactor. It doesn't have to be him. Ara looked at each of them. Take care of him. Tell him. Tell him I finally understand what Ara saw in humanity. She ran before they could stop her, heading toward the reactor room. Behind her, she heard shouting orders for evacuation. Ara made it halfway to the reactor when his voice crackled over her communicator. Sentinel, stop. I'm already here. No. Captain always taught us no one gets left behind. That includes him. The engineer's voice was surprisingly calm. I've been working on a theory. If I can shield myself in the maintenance tube and time the vent perfectly, I might survive the radiation burst. Might. That's insane. Yeah, well, I learned from humans. Laughed. Get out of here, Sentinel, and tell the captain this was my choice. Ara stood frozen for a moment, then ran for the escape pods. She found struggling to get an unconscious Minyu into a pod while coordinating the evacuation. Was there too, making sure everyone got out. "It's in the reactor room," Ara reported. "She thinks she can survive it." His face went white. "That's impossible." Impossible seems to be what humans do best. They got Minu into an escape pod with Ara. The pod launched just as the reactor vented, a massive pulse of energy that lit up space like a small sun. The shockwave hit their pod, sending them tumbling through space, but they survived. Through the viewport, Ara watched Nexus Prime go dark, its power completely dead. But it hadn't exploded, had done it. Around them, dozens of escape pods floated in space, carrying thousands of evacuees. Coalition warships arrived minutes later, having received the distress signal. They engaged the Sovereignty ships, driving them away. Minu woke up an hour later in the rescue ship's medical bay. Ara was sitting beside his bed when his eyes opened. "What happened?" he asked groggy. "Why am I? You hit me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're an idiot who thinks his life is worth less than everyone else's." Ara's voice was rough with emotion. "And because I couldn't let you die." Understanding dawned on his face. "The reactor, who vented it?" "She's alive, but barely. Radiation burns but says she'll recover." Minu closed his eyes with relief. "Thank the stars." "She said you taught her that no one gets left behind. She was right." Ara leaned forward. "You stupid, brave, wonderful human. Don't you ever do that again." "Do what?" "Try to sacrifice yourself. If you die, I'll—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. Minu smiled weakly. "You'll what?" "I'll be very angry with you." "Can't have that." He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm against her silver-blue skin. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me first," Ara said quietly. "You just didn't know it." The Coalition responded to the attack with overwhelming force. The Sovereignty was driven back, their leadership prosecuted for war crimes. New security measures were established for all civilian stations. Nexus Prime was repaired and upgraded over the following months. Ara stood in the observation deck during the station's recommissioning ceremony. Minu joined her, looking official in his dress uniform. "So," he said, "your transfer request to permanent assignment got approved. You're stuck with us now." "I can think of worse fates." "Really? Because 6 months ago, you could barely stand to look at me." "6 months ago, I was a fool." Ara turned to face him. "I hated humans because I didn't understand them. I blamed you for things that weren't your fault, and I almost let that hate destroy me. And now I understand what my sister knew. You're infuriating, chaotic, impossibly stubborn." She smiled. "And the best thing that ever happened to this galaxy." Minu laughed. "That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me." "Don't let it go to your head, Captain." But she was smiling too. A real smile, not the cold mask she had worn for so long. Over the following years, Ara became more than just security chief. She started training programs that shared combat techniques with human officers. She established cultural exchange initiatives between species. She before the Coalition Council about the importance of truth and accountability. And she stayed at Minu's side through everything, their partnership becoming legendary throughout the Coalition fleet. One evening, years later, a young officer arrived at Nexus Prime. Fresh from the academy, full of the same prejudices Ara had once carried, clearly uncomfortable serving on a human-commanded station. Ara recognized that look. She had worn it herself once. She invited the young officer to the observation deck and sat down beside him. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "You think humans are reckless, chaotic, dangerous. You think you deserve better than this assignment." The officer looked surprised but nodded. "I once felt exactly as you do," Ara continued. "Let me tell you a story about how one human changed my mind and my life." She told him about Minu, about Haven's Rest, about getting trapped in that station, about learning the truth about Telos 9. She told him about watching humans do impossible things because they refused to accept that anything was impossible. Humans aren't perfect, she concluded. They break things, they make mistakes, they move too fast, but they also fix what they break. They learn from their mistakes, and they possess something my ancient species lost over an unwavering belief that tomorrow can be better than today. The young officer was quiet for a long moment. And you really believe that humans are good for the galaxy? I believe they're essential, Ara said firmly. They remind the rest of us why we formed the coalition in the first place, not to maintain order, but to build something better together than any of us could build alone. She looked out at the stars, thinking about everything she had learned. I hated humans once, she said softly, until one of them conquered my heart, not through force or manipulation, but through simple, genuine kindness and an unshakable belief that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. The young officer nodded slowly, processing her words. Ara stood to leave, then turned back. Give it time, keep your eyes open. You might be surprised by what you learn. As she walked back through Nexus Prime's corridors, Ara passed arguing cheerfully with engineers about a modification, singing in the medical bay, and attempting to beat his own impossible flight record. And in the command center, she found Minu reviewing reports, looking tired but happy. He glanced up when she entered and smiled, that warm, understanding smile that had somehow found its way past all her defenses. Everything okay? He asked. Everything's perfect, Ara said. And for the first time in years, she meant it completely.